Welcome back to another episode of Christian Natural Health. Today, I'm very pleased to have Brad Pitzele with us. Brad knows what it's like to be seriously ill and running out of options. While navigating cancer, autoimmunity, and Lyme disease, he could barely walk. Exercise with oxygen therapy and red light therapy changed the trajectory of his recovery, and he built 1,000 roads to bring those same tools to others. Today, he hosts expert conversations across chronic health recovery, biohacking, and longevity, and is a featured guest on health and wellness podcasts like this one. Welcome, Brad. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what a story. Tell us that. What?
Oh man. So I had I developed psoriasis when I was in second grade.
Okay.
It was mild, didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
Um, and everything was fine, but then throughout my childhood I had weird symptoms blink in and out, and I'd go to the doctor and they would give it a name and there was no treatment for this named thing, and then it would kind of go
Yeah.
away a month or two later and I'd move on with life.
Right.
Other than that, I was pretty healthy until I was in my middle 30s. I started to develop arthritis. Went to the doctor and he's like, "Hey, it's something called psoriatic arthritis, which is an autoimmune arthritis you get when you have psoriasis, kind of like rheumatoid."
Yeah.
And so he put me on drugs, and I was on those for a few years, and they would help a little bit, and then I'd get worse, and then he put me on more and
Mm,
not quite as much, but then I get even worse.
yeah.
Um, and then I developed melanoma, which is a side effect of those drugs.
Oh
And
no. Yikes.
so, yeah, that was a pretty scary moment. I had a young family at the time, and I went back to my rheumatologist and said, "What do we do here? If I take the drugs, I risk
Right.
more melanoma and cancer, and if I don't, then I'm gonna die in a ball of pain in the corner." And he's like, "No, we'll just try a different drug in the same category and hope it doesn't react the same way to your
Oh my
body."
gosh.
Yeah, I walked out of that appointment, and I remember getting my vehicle, and I just turned the radio off, and I was just sitting in there at the air conditioning blasting, and I was just thinking, I just had this flash forward to myself being in my deathbed in a hospital for cancer, and saying, "You shouldn't have listened to him," and
Yeah.
that was kind of what I heard and I just thought, I don't like either of these choices. Take it, don't take it. Neither seems great.
Right.
And then I just kind of said something offhand to myself because I didn't know what else to say to comfort myself. I'm like, well, I guess I got to find a third way.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't
Yeah.
and I started researching. I started self experimenting. I started getting into patient communities or chronic illness communities online.
Right.
Reading what other people are doing, reading research on things people weren't talking about, and self-experimenting with diet and supplements and
Mm-hmm.
protocols, and nothing worked, and I just kept getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I went to a functional medicine doctor, and he suggested I get tested for Lyme disease when nothing he was doing was helping me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, I don't have Lyme disease. I didn't get bit by a tick. I didn't have that bullseye thing. This is
Right.
nonsense. And I didn't even want to do it because it was $500, and I knew it was a waste of time. But I just decided I'd do it to prove it to him so we
Yeah.
could move on and find the real thing. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, it came back positive. And I
Yeah.
went back to him and I was like, "Look, what's the chances of a false positive here?" And he's
Right.
like, "Brad, you have the DNA of this bacteria in your urine. What do you think's the chances?" I'm like, "Oh, it was a
Right.
DNA test. Got it." So
Yeah.
I had Lyme disease and a co-infection called Bartonella. And so, yeah, that was kind of how I was diagnosed with all that. After he'd kind of run out of things for me to try, he started saying I need to look at mitochondrial health.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, nowadays people are talking about it, but back then it wasn't really talked about so much.
Yeah.
And the first thing he recommended I try was either hyperbaric oxygen or something called exercise with oxygen therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's kind of how I got into this. I started looking into hyperbaric, and it was going to be 8 weeks, 7 days a week, an hour and a half in a hyperbaric chamber in a
Mm-hmm.
doctor's office. Not the soft chambers you can do at home. It had to be the hard shell ones. And the price tag was 75,000.
Yeah.
Unless he said he could get me a good deal for 50,000 if I wanted to fly out and live in Florida for 2 months.
Oh my
Which
gosh.
yeah, I'm like, well, the cost of flying and renting, and
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm
At
going to
that
lose my
point.
job. So
Right.
that's so I knew that wasn't, and I tried so many things, Lauren, and you're like, well, how am I going to feel after I spend 50 or 75 grand and I feel no better on the back end? And I just like spent all like,
Yeah.
I couldn't even like go there mentally. And so I
Yeah.
started looking at this exercise with oxygen therapy, and there was a few folks offering it. The
Hmm.
only place I could find any information was on the sites that were selling it, and it was all filled with like hyperbole, mega awesomeness, and turbo
Hmm.
that. And
Yeah, which is
I
always
was
a
like,
red flag.
yeah, I was like, I don't trust this. And
Sure.
they were like $5,000 to $25,000, and I'm like, it was one of those things where it's like I don't have the confidence in this, and no one's
Sure.
talking about it in these patient communities.
Right.
So I was like, I'm not investing that kind of money. So I kind of got up from the computer after I've been doing my research. I said, I'm not doing either of those. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I kind of thought about it for a little bit, and I was just like, well, then what? What are you going to do? Right? Like,
Mhm.
what's
Right.
your next best option if it's neither of those?
Sure.
And that's when it hit me. I really run the gamut, and I didn't have anything. So I was like, I was joking, I'm a recovering engineer. I spent the first decade of my career engineering.
Uh-huh.
I was a mechanical engineer. And so I decided, I'm like, well, maybe I'll just figure it out and build my own. And that's
Mhm.
what I did. And
Wow.
yeah. And I didn't believe it would do anything. I thought it was the most
Yeah.
ridiculous idea in the world. I'm like, oxygen? I've been breathing that my whole life. Why would I gotten, if I was,
Uh-huh.
why would it get me any
Sure.
better? I've
Sure.
been
Sure.
breathing it the whole time I've been getting sick.
Yeah.
And it probably took me a few months before it really started to feel any benefits and I started to have some confidence in it. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And about a year later, I went back to go see that doctor, and he was shocked. Like, he walked in the door and he was shocked at how much better I was. He could just see it, Like,
Yeah.
he
Right.
walked in the door and he kind of popped his head back, like
Is
he
this
had to
the
gather
same? Yeah.
himself. And he was kind of teasing me. He's
Right.
like, "Oh my gosh, you're so much better. Are you doing the oxygen?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
am, doctor." And he's like, "Well, where'd you get it from so I can tell my patients about it?" And I was like, and I was kind of like, knew I was going to disappoint him. Like, I didn't get it from anywhere. I just kind of made it myself.
Uh-huh.
And he kind of looked at me crazy. He's like, "You made your own thing?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, after he thought about it for a second, he's like, "Would you consider making them for my patients?"
Hmm.
And I kind of recoiled at first. I'm like, I'm still on my healing. I'm not going to go add more stuff to my life.
Yeah.
Then I went home and sat with it for a while, and about 6 months later, we got around to like launching the company. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. So, all right. Exercise with oxygen therapy as opposed to either one alone. Why?
yeah,
Hmm.
it's a great question. So you have to understand what oxygen does in the body first, which is um, oxygen's so important. I mean, the oxygen's the reason why we're not all single-celled organisms, because many billions of years ago, some single-cell organisms swallowed another bacteria and realized it could get more energy from, rather than digesting it, to house it inside of itself and take on all of the energy it was producing. And that became our mitochondria. So these are these energy producers inside of our cells. Mitochondria were once their own bacteria. Now they're considered organelles in our cells.
Hmm.
And oxygen's so important because a cell can produce energy with or without oxygen.
Hmm.
When it has oxygen, it can produce 20 times more energy than when it doesn't.
Yep.
And when it has oxygen, it's burning clean fuel. When it doesn't have oxygen, it produces a lot of metabolic waste. We all know about lactic acid. When you feel that stiffness in your muscles,
Hmm.
that's because your cell has run out of oxygen and it's switched to anaerobic respiration, and it's
Hmm.
spitting out all this metabolic waste, and
Hmm.
that's causing damage inside your cells. That's what happens when your cells run out of oxygen. So oxygen is really important for energy production. That's not just about alertness. That's like every cell in your body being able to do whatever it's supposed to do, whether that's your heart, your muscles, your brain. They need oxygen, and when they don't have enough, they can't perform their essential functions.
Hmm.
But also, when your body runs low on oxygen, anywhere in your body it creates inflammation. So anywhere in your body you have inflammation, you have oxygen starvation locally around it. It's called
Hmm.
hypoxia, is the medical term. And anywhere you have hypoxia, inflammation follows. You can't have one without the other. So oxygen is really important for maintaining a low inflammatory environment. It's very important for cellular function. It's also very important for detoxification.
Hmm.
So oxygen, the way your body removes chemicals from it is through a a reaction called an oxidation reaction. Oxygen is added to these chemicals. It helps break them apart into smaller components. Our livers, our kidneys, all of our elimination organs use to remove it. So oxygen is actually really important, and as we age, we actually lose about 1% of our body's ability to utilize oxygen every year past the age of 25. Mm-hmm. And so most of us, it's not a big deal. At 27, you don't notice a difference, a 2% drop. But then you get to 50 and you've lost 25% of your body's ability to utilize oxygen. That's a significant drop in energy. It's part of the reason why you feel lower energy when you're older. It's part of the reason why perhaps you have more memory challenges. It's part of the reason why you're slower to heal, or you feel stiffer after a workout. All of these things are signals that our body's not getting and utilizing enough oxygen. And this is actually part of where this whole mitochondrial dysfunction that's now circulating in all these health spaces has come from. So exercise with oxygen therapy was discovered by this German inventor and physicist in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. His name is Manfred von Ardenne. He invented the scanning electron microscope. He helped commercialize the original CRT television sets in the 1930s.
Oh,
and
cool.
and in the late 50s and early 60s, he turned his interest towards a Nobel Prize winner's research, Otto Warburg. Otto Warburg did a lot of research on oxygen, and he found that he could turn a normal cell into a cancerous cell simply by depriving it of oxygen, and he won a Nobel Prize for some of that work. So Manfred von Ardenne wanted to push some of that work forward, and he's what we call the godfather of exercise with oxygen therapy. And one of the big ahas that came out of his work was that as we all age, even before chronic illness, but even worse in chronic illness, we have this inflammation that builds up inside of our bodies, including our circulatory system. And at the very ends of our circulatory system are these capillaries. They're thinner than a human hair, and they're where the oxygen gets delivered to the cells. But they're so small, the red blood cells that normally carry our oxygen have to fit through single file, and they actually have to fold up to fit inside because the red blood cells are bigger than the capillary. So they fold up like a taco to slide through single file. So any inflammation you have in there can cause the red blood cells to not be able to deliver oxygen. And this is why we have this drop of oxygen utilization. Well, he started running research on exercise with oxygen, and he found it caused this powerful anti-inflammatory impact because oxygen's anti-inflammatory. And it reopened up these capillaries to allow them to deliver oxygen even when you weren't doing exercise with oxygen therapy. So that was like the big aha moment that started this whole kind of modality, was that. Now, that's a long way around. Your question is, why would you use oxygen with exercise? Because when you exercise, your body knows it's in an oxygen deficit. So immediately it says, we need more energy. The gating factor for producing more energy is not more food in Western culture. We all get plenty of food. It's oxygen. And so it immediately does a bunch of things to compensate, which is you start breathing faster and deeper. Your lung membrane thins out to allow more oxygen to pass through. The capillaries inside your lungs become engorged with blood where they normally aren't. So there's more oxygen getting into your bloodstream. And then your heart starts beating faster and deeper, your blood vessels dilate, and your blood pressure goes up during exercise, which forces more oxygen out of the bloodstream and into the tissue and deeper into the tissue. So you have all these physiological adaptations during exercise that are all about oxygen consumption and delivery. And so we take advantage of that. We basically hijack that by breathing near pure oxygen at the same time when your body's thirsting for that oxygen. And so in like a 15-minute session, you can breathe in as much oxygen as you would in a full 24 hours if you were just sedentary.
So I would also assume that some of this, that's what's happening in the moment, but also exercise, as I understand it, is one of the best ways that you can boost mitochondrial regeneration as well. So as you're talking about this, it's kind of like, because the body has all of these feedback systems that are trying to be in balance, oxygen is a good thing, but too much of it can actually create oxidative stress and damage if your mitochondria can't handle it. So it also sounds like in doing this, yes, in the moment, you're actually perfusing your tissues with more oxygen, but at the same time, in the long term, you're also creating adaptive changes that make the mitochondria healthier and able to handle more of that oxygen. Is
That,
there, yeah, go ahead.
no, that's right. You
Yeah.
ask your question.
Yeah, no, my question was going to be is there a safeguard at all around the like how high is too high for the oxygen for this given individual? How do we make sure that we're not going to create oxidative stress in the process?
Great question. The biggest risk with oxygen is oxygen toxicity, actually. So, if you were a scuba diver and diving down at the bottom of the ocean, you spent too much time breathing bottled oxygen under that pressure, you can develop oxygen toxicity. Same
Hmm.
thing if you were to overdo hyperbaric oxygen,
Hmm.
you can create oxygen toxicity. And what basically happens in oxygen toxicity is the oxygen becomes trapped in our circulatory system and it can't get out. Um, you can't get that with EWOT because there's two reasons. One is we're not under pressure. So if you were to be sedentary and just breathing oxygen sitting on the couch, you could still get oxygen toxicity. It would take over a day of breathing oxygen sedentary. And
Okay.
because, as I mentioned, the reservoir we use allows for basically a day worth, so it's not enough. The
Hmm.
second safeguard is because you're exercising, you're producing a massive amount of carbon dioxide gas, your exhale gases. And that's not just a waste product in the body. It does much more. One of the things it does is it increases the pressure inside your circulatory system
Hmm.
and it forces the oxygen out of the circulatory system and into the body. So even if you could do exercise with oxygen therapy
Right.
unabated for a day straight, you still couldn't get oxygen toxicity. So that's
Right.
one of the great things is great safety profile. As
Yeah.
far as oxidative stress, they've done so much research on exercise with oxygen therapy, and particularly
Mhm.
around Olympic athletes and in other kind of
People who are
trials dealing
already,
with athletic
yeah,
performance.
sure.
And there was not an increase in oxidative stress. And it's exactly what you
Yeah.
pointed out because we're not just increasing the oxygen status of the body, we're
Hmm.
increasing the demand for oxygen in the mitochondria, both in the
Yeah.
moment, but
Right.
we're also creating mitogenesis
Right.
by mitogenesis is the creation of new mitochondria, and that you need a couple things to happen for that. The first thing is, as Lauren pointed out,
Hmm.
is you need the stimulus. The body needs a reason to invest
Right.
resources into more mitochondria.
Yeah.
Exercise does that. It says, hey, you're going to need to produce more energy. You're going to need more mitochondria.
Sure.
Um, and then the second thing it needs is it needs what we'll call excess energy. So
Hmm.
if it's just plodding along and it's in an anaerobic state,
Hmm.
it's not even able to do its core functions.
Right.
It's not going to start producing new mitochondria.
Hmm.
But when we reperfuse the tissue with oxygen and we kick us back into aerobic respiration, we can start to produce that excess energy that it can reinvest in
Yeah.
creating new mitochondria.
Yeah, that's great. So there's all these safeguards in place by making sure that you're not doing oxygen without exercise, you're putting them together. And then you're also adding red light therapy, which does what specifically to help all the rest of this.
Red light therapy is really fascinating. Uh, there's tens of thousands of documented research papers on it.
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting why we need it, but what it does in the body is two specific things. The first thing it does is near infrared, which is what we pair with red, is experienced by the body as heat. And so
Mhm.
if you ever think when you were sore, maybe you put your arm on a heating pad, that
Mhm.
increases local circulation wherever you're heating.
Mhm.
So that's what happens with the near infrared light is the first thing it does is it creates a little bit of heat and that increases circulation to the tissue being treated by causing vasodilation, causing your blood vessels to open up.
Mhm.
But the bigger thing it really does is at the mitochondria, it causes the mitochondria to utilize more oxygen. So it creates a demand signal in the mitochondria that says, use more oxygen, use it more efficiently so
Mhm.
that it can produce more energy. So as you were saying, is we the first thing we do is we flood the body with oxygen so there's an abundance of it
Mhm.
floating around in our tissues and in our blood.
Mhm.
And then we create this signal with red light and say, hey, now go take all this excess oxygen and create more energy so
Mhm.
that the body has this excess energy that it can use for repair, it can use for immune health, It can
Right.
use for mitogenesis,
Right.
etc.
Yeah. So, and I'm still kind of wondering about in the early stages of somebody beginning all of this. So, my understanding is that in the mitochondria, as the electrons are coming in, if there's a bottleneck, if there's not enough demand on the other end in order to produce the ATP, that's where you can end up, or either there's a bottleneck, or if the mitochondria are inefficient, poisoned, whatever, you're going to end up with some of those electrons, which can come from the oxygen, spilling out, creating local oxidative stress. And then you get this perpetual cycle of potentially problems. Now, some of that is also good because it's sending a feedback signal to the body that says, these aren't
Hormetic
very
stress.
efficient, break these mitochondria down, make new ones. So there's that. You don't want to quench all of it. But I'm wondering in the early stages of this, do you increase demand at all for like glutathione or various other antioxidants that might need to clean up some of the repair because we've got like we've maybe depleted the current reserves? Is that something you check for? Is it necessary?
Well, particularly when you're dealing with someone who's chronically ill, there is no harm in adding glutathione to the mix or any other
Mhm.
antioxidants. I'll say
Yeah,
that because when you're in an inflammatory state, you're dealing with there's kind of two parts of inflammation, or three parts, I'd say. There's what's going on right now in your body, and if there's
hmm
inflammation right now, that's causing damage.
hmm
Number two is upstream of that, what's causing that inflammation, and how do we turn that
Yeah,
spigot off?
absolutely. Yeah,
And then the third one is how do we mop up and repair all of the damage that's been done by it, right?
sure,
So
sure.
you
Yeah.
really need to address each one of those.
hmm
So early on, there's no harm in adding pro-oxidants,
hmm
right, to the mix. Excuse me, antioxidants to the mix
Right.
to confront those pro-oxidants
hmm
or oxidative stress in the body. Um, no harm, and a lot of folks do that. The great thing about it is, you can combine it. There's not really like, hey, watch out sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
However, I will tell you, we don't generally see that because you're dealing with the anti-inflammatory nature of oxygen, and
Right.
what we describe as happening in aging is only accelerating people with almost all chronic illness, which is the inflammation is causing low oxygen delivery, is causing more oxidative stress. Because as you mentioned, too much oxygen can create oxidative stress, but not enough creates a ton of oxidative stress too.
Totally. Feedback. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Right.
and the other thing is we often vilify oxidative stress a little bit as good, as you were
Right.
alluding to. Like that's hormetic stress, which
Yes.
just means it's a natural stress, and a little
Yep.
bit of natural stress is our body's way of responding. It's the same way
Right.
exercise works. Is if you
Sure.
do exercise, your body goes, "Oh, we can't do this much. We need to build stronger muscles. We need to
Yep.
build better oxygen delivery,
Yeah.
etc." Because it's responding to the stress. And so
hmm
some oxidation is necessary for life
Right.
and for healthy, but in a chronic illness state, it's usually run away.
Yep, absolutely. So, and how would, so the mitochondria make ATP from oxygen and also from originally glucose from what we're eating.
Yes.
So, how does metabolic health play into all of this?
Metabolic health is incredibly important. Obviously, anyone who's dealing with chronic illness, a lot of times one of the first things you do is you start looking at the food you're eating. I mean, right? You start thinking
Mhm.
about, are you drinking clean water? Are
Right.
you eating cleanly? Super important, right? Like,
Yeah.
our body is miraculous, but it
Mhm.
also needs help.
Yeah.
You can't feed it Twinkies and ding
Give
dongs
it the
and
building blocks. Yep.
so,
Right.
so obviously, if you're dealing with a chronic health condition and then you're creating insulin resistance on
Yeah.
top of it, like
Sure.
you're just putting yourself into more of an inflammatory situation. And I always describe it as people who are dealing with chronic illness. I always describe it as like a bathtub. We all have inflammation, and it's like the water
Mhm.
line in the bathtub. But for the folks with chronic illness, it's starting to spill over. And so,
Mhm.
your sister who's not sick, she can have that crap food and she's fine. But for you,
Yeah.
you've already gone past the red alert zone.
Yeah.
So all of this plays together. At the end of the day, you need oxygen for it's the very end electron acceptor, as you pointed out, in the mitochondria that allows it to produce energy and
Mhm.
turn that glucose into fuel.
Mhm.
But also, the great thing about exercise with oxygen therapy, because there is an exercise component to it, is that also can help with insulin sensitivity.
Yep.
It can help with it increases, and there's a lot of research on it showing that it will increase fat burning during the exercise, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera.
Yeah.
Now, I don't tout it as a weight loss fat, but it's your body learning to use
Mm.
that fat for energy, which is incredibly important.
Yep, absolutely. So like what you have coming in as far as the glucose, oxygen, all the rest of it, how much ATP you make out of that depends on the demand. So if you're not,
Right.
if you're consuming massive amounts of calories, even if you're exercising, you've still got some oxidative stress, you've got some spilling out and it's not getting utilized adequately. And the mitochondria are still slugging, still kind of struggling in order to function. But if you've got both of those components, then you've optimized the system, it sounds like. So that's awesome.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how exactly, I want a picture of what you built. Like, what
Yeah.
exactly does this look like?
Well, yeah, I'll describe it for folks.
Sure.
So there's two ways you can get oxygen. One is you
Uh-huh.
can get an oxygen bottle.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the problem, you can't really use an oxygen bottle for this. Number one, you'd suck down the entire oxygen tank in a session and you'd
Mhm.
be running with it in the trunk of your car to somewhere to get it refilled all the time. So
Sure. Yeah.
that's not practical. It's
Right.
also not particularly safe.
Yeah.
Um, the other way you produce oxygen is with a device called an oxygen concentrator. And what it does is it takes the room air at 21% oxygen, effectively
Mhm.
purifies it
Yeah.
to 93% oxygen, medical grade.
Okay.
The only, and these are little devices that are, maybe 18 inches, 2 feet tall,
Yeah.
maybe 12 or 15 inches wide, sort of thing. You plug them
Yeah.
in the wall and flip a switch and they go.
Yeah.
The challenge with them is the ones you can get are usually either 5 liters or 10 liters. Now, when you're that's how much they'll produce in a minute, how much
Mhm.
oxygen.
Mhm.
When you're exercising, you can easily use 50 or 60 liters in a minute.
Wow.
So they can't keep up with you. So if you were to
Yeah.
try to hook a mask up to one of these and breathe it, you'd be getting 10 liters maybe of oxygen and 40 liters of air. Instead of getting 93% oxygen, you might end
Right.
up with 35% oxygen,
Yeah.
which is somewhat improvement, but it's not what we really need.
Yeah.
So what we do is we use this device and we fill a large reservoir. It looks like a big pillow, about 6 feet
Okay.
wide by 6 feet tall.
Okay.
Think of it like a big balloon, effectively. And we fill it with 1,000 liters. So if you think about a 2 liter bottle of soda,
Uh-huh.
500 of those. So it's big.
Wow.
The reason it's big is because you can consume a massive amount of oxygen when you exercise. And then from that, we've got a hose and we hook it up to a mask that you wear.
Yeah.
And then you just do 15 minutes of exercise while you do it. Now, we should talk about the type of exercise because,
Yes.
especially when we're
Right.
talking about people with chronic illness, we're
Mhm.
not talking about high intensity interval
Sure.
training.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, please tell. So how do you determine where people start? If somebody's been sedentary for a long time, they feel lousy, they don't have a lot of energy, where do you start?
Yeah. So we have people start where they are. The really fascinating thing about exercise, the oxygen therapy, and the thing you'll most likely notice on your very first session is as soon as you put the mask on, the exercise is easier. I
Hmm.
remember myself, I was using an elliptical machine, and the first time I put it on, I had to crank up the resistance, and the second time I had to crank it up more, and a month
Yeah,
later I had to crank it up even more.
right.
Even though I had been using that machine for years, it
Uh-huh.
just increases your endurance because, as I was mentioning, the amount of energy you can produce is gated by how much oxygen you can
Right.
deliver to your tissues.
Uh-huh.
In fact, the scientific term is VO2 max, the
Right.
maximum volume of oxygen you can consume
Right.
depends on your endurance. And so we
Yeah.
increase your oxygen consumption.
Yeah.
Um, but the great thing is it works where you can start wherever you're at. So for people who are really sick, they can start by slow walking on a treadmill. They can start by using one of those $49 under the desk pedal bikes that you buy
Hmm.
on Amazon. They can
Yeah.
start by bouncing on a rebounder, doing
Hmm.
calisthenics in place. Anything to get your heart rate up. All we're trying to
Hmm.
do is elevate your heart rate while you're breathing the oxygen.
Hmm.
And for folks who are even too sick to do any of that, they can even there's a passive version where they just put the mask on while they sit underneath like an infrared sauna blanket because that
Okay.
can elevate your heart rate a little bit as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And so it sounds like essentially the concept is the oxygen makes it easier, just in the same way that if you go up to the mountains and you try to run a marathon, you're going to have a much harder time than if you do it
Yes.
at sea level, right? Same
Yep.
concept. So, and then are there safeguards as far as heart rate? Are we watching, making sure that heart rate doesn't go too high initially for people, especially if their autonomic nervous system is kind of on the fritz, things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So genuinely, what we definitely recommend is for people who are sick,
Mm-hmm.
you start slow and you listen to your body.
Yep. Yep.
Even folks who are sick, most of them can get into it and do it. Now, don't push yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because here's the deal, is pushing yourself, you're actually using more energy than you're slowing your recovery. And so this is
Mm-hmm.
not a more pain, more gain,
Yeah.
sort of scenario. That is totally the wrong way to
Sure.
do
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
When we have folks starting who are really sick, what we have them do is we'll have them start by just stationary oxygen breathing. So start
Okay.
with 3 minutes of stationary oxygen breathing and see how
Mm-hmm.
you feel that day and the next day.
Yeah.
And the reason is EWOT is an incredibly powerful detoxifier. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine as you're getting sick, your oxygen utilization is going down. A lot of your areas where you're inflamed, that are hypoxic, they are oxygen starved.
Mm-hmm.
When your cells become oxygen starved, they start producing a massive amount of metabolic waste,
Mm-hmm.
but they're in a low energy state. Those cells are running on like 5% energy. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the first things they stop doing is taking the trash out. So all this metabolic waste just builds up inside your cell walls.
Mm-hmm.
And now we flood you with oxygen, and your body's like, oh, time to take out the trash. And it takes it all out.
Yeah.
And it overwhelms your elimination organs. So now you've got all these toxins
Yep.
floating
Yep.
in your blood, waiting in line to get through your liver and your kidneys and get out. And
Yep.
in that time, you just feel like you're hungover or you've got the flu. And so we don't want a detoxification reaction. So we have them start slow, just breathe it for 3 or 5 minutes, see how you feel that day and the next day. If you feel fine, the next session you increase it till you get to 15 minutes of stationary. And then once you can do 15 minutes of stationary, you start replacing each one of those last minutes with a minute of light exercise until you can do 15 minutes of light exercise. And then you can start to slowly increase intensity. What I do recommend for people, there is a cap to your point, which is I generally like them to stay in the 70 to 80% of their theoretical max heart rate. That's like the terminal value, if you will, the place you end. Some folks never make it there. I've got 80-year-old, grandmas who are, recovering from something, and that's okay. They still can get a lot of benefits.
Sure.
That's kind of the sweet spot where we're maximizing the circulation benefits of exercise without wearing the body down by doing too much, like getting too intense with it, where we're creating a lot of oxidative stress, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. So, kind of a side note here, there's a huge trend lately. Everybody's been asking me about creatine. Everybody talking about how that's so great for, just cognition and getting a better workout and things along those lines. I would suspect, I usually caution people a little bit against overusing it because I don't want people consuming all of the ATP that they've made. If there's a reason why their mitochondria are not super efficient at producing it, now we're essentially setting you up for a crash. But I'm wondering in this particular situation, I would guess it's probably not best to add that for that reason, because what we're trying to do is make your mitochondria more efficient at creating ATP, not helping you to utilize what's already there again, right?
Yeah, I think that's right,
Yeah.
particularly early on in the journey. I think
Right.
a little bit later on you can
Then
add
you
it, but
can
I definitely like one thing at a time and listen to your body is always my mantra.
right.
Early on, it's about creating excess ATP, and your body's got plenty of places to use it because if you're chronically ill, you've got a lot of damage inside that needs turnover. You need to produce new healthy mitochondria, and that's at the root of it. You're going to address a lot of that because you're
Mhm.
going to go from you've had these mitochondria that have been dealing with a lot of oxidative stress from anaerobic respiration,
Mhm.
lactic acid, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And now you're giving them signal like, hey, here's your energy back, which is, it's this
Yeah.
20x energy multiplier.
Yeah.
But they're sluggish, they're
Right.
still having a hard time,
Sure.
but they're producing energy and they know now, hey, I'm getting
They're
consistent
adapting. Yeah.
oxygen. It's time to
Mhm.
produce new mitochondria that can do this better.
Can
And in
handle
your
it.
body's wisdom, that's what
Mhm.
happens. And so over time, it's shocking some of the transformations I've seen in folks.
Mhm.
But the other thing that's shocking is it happens over a long period of time, I guess. Like for me, I continued to see incremental benefits in my health and wellness, even beyond just recovery from chronic illness, into
Mhm.
my third year of using it.
Mhm.
And if you think about that, imagine today you don't exercise and you start exercising and you keep doing the same thing every day. By month 4, you're probably plateaued, right?
Right.
Like,
Typically, yeah.
why? Like, I continue to get it into year 3, and
Okay.
I kind of see that as that's part of that natural turnover. What's happening in
Right.
your cells is you're getting rid of all that damaged tissue that doesn't work efficiently, and you're
Right.
continuing to replace it with new cells and new
Yeah.
mitochondria
Yeah.
that can do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. What have I not asked you that you want to make sure you leave with our audience?
Um, I think one thing that's interesting is why we need red light,
Okay.
and it's eye opening to folks. The
Mm-hmm.
reason why we need red light is red light is we naturally get it. The sun is full spectrum, everything from UV to red and infrared.
Yep.
However, we've all moved indoors over the centuries, so we're not in the sunlight as much, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, even more recently, we've moved to more LED lighting, and LED lighting has removed all of the reds and near infrareds that even incandescents had in the name of efficiency. So we all know LEDs are supposed to be more energy efficient, and the reason they're more energy efficient is they cut out the reds and near infrareds that we experience as heat, because you don't want the lighting to heat the room, is the thought, because then you're paying to cool the room back down, etc. And if you're trying to heat it, maybe there's a more efficient way. But
Right.
that leaves us starved of these. And light is not just for seeing, it's a signal for our bodies. Our bodies, in all the infinite wisdom, were designed to take on these photons, and they have different biochemical processes in us. So normally you get red light in near infrared light at 2 times of the day. You get it first thing in the morning on the early sun,
Mm-hmm.
and late in the evening when it's low on the horizons, when we get more red and near infrared.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, interestingly enough, that's where red and near infrared help, is they can help you. You usually do them early in the morning. They'll help with energy production,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But you can also do them later in the evening, and it'll
Mm-hmm.
help with melatonin and sleepfulness. But
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't do them in the middle of the day. So
Oh,
timing
interesting.
does matter with
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Because in the middle of the day, the sorts of light we're experiencing are those blue lights, right? So we hear how bad blue lights are. Blue light's good for us, but
Uh-huh.
in a
In a
dose,
narrow window. Sure.
the problem is we're getting noon light all day long, and every time we stare
Mm-hmm.
at our phone, and so then our body is telling us to stay awake,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. So I think that's really the amazing thing about it is what I really liked about both these therapies was, number one, I asked myself whenever I was doing anything, what's the harm if I do it and I don't do it right? And I was like, it's
Mm-hmm.
oxygen and it's light, and like the downside wasn't too much to it.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing I always asked myself when I was sick, I had what I called the ceremonies. I was counting out pills, I had
Mm-hmm.
protocols, and then I
Yeah.
had a detox, and I did this and I did
Sure.
that. And it became a 6-hour ordeal, and then you kind of throw up your hands like, I don't have 6 hours, I'm just throwing it all
Sure.
out.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
think that's what's so amazing is EWOT itself you can do in 15 minutes and 3 to 5 times a week,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll help you detox. It'll help with a stronger immune system. It's
Yeah.
oxygen's strongly anti-cancerous,
Mm-hmm.
so it offers a variety of different benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do both of them in like 25 minutes. And so
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's something that's
It's a lot more
achievable for
doable.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Where can people go to learn more about you and about 1000 Roads?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, 1000roads.com/Lauren, we have a special offer for your listeners,
Mm-hmm.
and they can learn more about it. And
Mm-hmm.
then they can also go to our YouTube channel. The handle is 1000 Roads HQ, and we
Mm-hmm.
put out weekly videos where you can learn more about how we're helping folks and the science of it.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes. And thanks so much, Brad. This has been really unique and insightful. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.